reality is, I mean, this is a guy who won league titles with Juventus, was the best player in Serie A at a very young age, won a World Cup, has been part of a transfer, 105 million euro. And yeah, a lot of people will say, was he worth it? Doesn't matter, Man United paid it. Ultimately. So, I think Pogba at 30 has achieved a tremendous amount. But we mentioned his age, and this will have a bearing as to on his future as well. This adverse analytical finding that he submitted after a game against Udinese, the first game of the season for Juventus, in which the irony being he didn't even play. He was an unused substitute when he gave that test.
Was this the doping?
This is the anti-doping control, and the worst case scenario in this is it could lead to a 4-year ban. I mean, that's the absolute worst case scenario.
That could see his career finished
for a player who's 31 in March. It would be a career ender. Now we have to await the outcome of his B sample. Paul Pogba's agent, Raffaella Pimenta, has said that until then they can't say any more. But what they can say is that Paul didn't want to break any rules. Juventus themselves are evaluating what the next steps are. For now, he's provisionally suspended. I think it's quite interesting, like looking at a couple of recent cases.
Yeah, Serbia is one that comes to mind, right? Did I imagine that? But did that get overturned?
So a decade ago, Francesco Acerbi, who was at Sassuolo at the time, he submitted an adverse analytical finding in a doping test. And he'd just come back from having a tumor on his testicle removed, and what the test showed was that the testosterone his body was producing was because the cancer had come back. Now, Acerbi has been one of the great stories in Serie A over the last decade because. In case you didn't notice, he was playing in a Champions League final for Inter.
Haaland marked out the game.
Yeah. So that's one case study. I think in Acerbi's case, his body was producing testosterone. I mean, if you look at the statement put out by the Italian anti-doping organization NADO, it shows that there was a non-endogenous testosterone melatites were being produced. That means they're not being produced by the body. So, but there's another case in recent history in Italy, only last year, with Atalanta centre back called Jose Palomino. Okay. He tested positive for clostridiol metabolites in pre-season. He was provisionally suspended, and he was later cleared because his legal team were able to show that there was an accidental contamination which led to that result. So I think this is quite interesting. We shouldn't prejudge Pogba on this test. We should await to see what happens with the B sample and what happens in the hearing to come. I think Juventus fans will tell you that they often are tried by the court of public opinion before an actual hearing.
Are we surprised?
It's taking place. I mean, again, not to circle back on the points penalties last year, but one of the kind of absurdities of it all, and I'm neutral on this. I'm just looking at it from a due process point of view. Was they were given points penalties by the Italian Football Federation prosecutor on the basis of evidence gathered in a criminal case, which is still, as we record this, has yet to be heard.
Okay.
So we should not prejudge Pogba in this case until we find out what's happened with this B sample and what happens at the anti-doping hearing.
But let's say Pogba does get tried, and he doesn't make it out of this, and his career, the last thing we hear about Paul Pogba in Serie A is a doping scandal. And he's still a massive draw for Serie A. You look at, Rafael Leao, future incredible player from what we've seen. He's still on the upsurge in his popularity, right? Yeah. Dybala doesn't, for me on the outside, as an outsider, doesn't feel like he's lamented his place as a face of Serie A. Incredible player, hindered by injury, but Paul Pogba still has an incredible global following. And if people want to watch Serie A, players, or if Serie A want people to watch the league, players like Paul Pogba have to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, Ayo, is that Paul Pogba, as much as he's seen as this player who divides opinion, tens of millions of people like Paul Pogba. Tens of millions of people watch Paul Pogba. He's got the highest Instagram following of any player in Serie A. The only player who comes close to him is Dybala. Okay, and that's because Dybala is big in South America, and he kind of looks like a cross between Justin Bieber and Zac Efron.
He's a good-looking lad. He's a good-looking lad.
But Pogba is the player who transcends the league. I've often reckoned with this over the last couple of years, and so, like, who is a star in Serie A? Who is truly box office? And the fact of the matter is, it's been Jose Mourinho been back at Roma, because when Jose Mourinho says something, it has a ripple effect that goes outside of Italy. Same with Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Now, you can talk about what stage those players are or coaches are in their careers. Zlatan's retired. But you were mentioning Leao. There are others, Victor Osimhen, Lautaro Martinez, who are stars in Italy, and our listeners will be aware of them. But they're not transcendent in the way that Pogba is. There are kids on the street in the US who might not know who Lautaro Martinez is, but will know who Paul Pogba is. And that's because of what he's done with his career up until now. And it's because he's been on Ballon d'Or shortlists. It's because he's been part of a transfer of 105 million euro to one of the biggest clubs in the world, in the most watched league in the world, the Premier League, whereas the others can't. And I only wrote a piece, I think last week or 10 days ago, about if Pogba could stay fit, he could easily be the best midfield player in that league. And there are lots of good midfield players in that league. It's Stanislav Lobotka, who again is not someone that a lot of people who don't follow Serie A know about. Plays for Napoli. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Tijani Reinders,
they're not global stars.
They're not global stars.
But also with Milinkovic Savic and also Brozovic going to Saudi Arabia, you've got this gaping hole.
Absolutely.
For a supreme midfielder in Serie A. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, this is the thing that just watching Pogba he's played in the last since he rejoined Juventus. If you tot up his minutes, it's the equivalent of like 3 and a bit games, right? But in those 3 and a bit games, he set up the equaliser in last year's Europa League semi-final. And then he started against Cremonese and got injured. We talked about that. And then even this season, they play against Bologna. He comes on and he sets Samuel Illing Jr., former Chelsea player, youngster at Juventus, on his way to cross for Vlahovic to score an equaliser. So a pre-assist, if you want to call it that. In Empoli, he scores one of those goals where you look at Pogba and you think, there aren't many midfield players who can do this. Volley on the edge of the box, past the goalkeeper. But it's chalked off for offside because Vlahovic had strayed offside. And so there are a lot of little moments, actually quite big, decisive moments, in very short spaces of time, which leaves you thinking, man, if this guy could play more than half an hour and he could do it every week, and unfortunately for him, that just isn't happening. And it's not going to happen in the immediate term whilst he's provisionally suspended. And so no matter what you think about him, you have to feel empathy. I mean, he talked in that interview about how he wants to prove people wrong. How he wants to be back doing what he loves. And, whatever you might think about, it became a cliche here with Graham Souness or pundits talking about his hairstyle, about his documentaries, about his other interests. think fundamentally, Paul Pogba loves playing football and wants to play football and focus on football. And unfortunately, these injuries and this adverse analytical finding is stopping him from doing that.
If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.